Hi, I'm Maximilian Alvarez. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Real News Network and host of the podcast Working People. And this is the art of class war on Breaking Points. 22 years ago, in February 2000, the beginning of the new millennium, meat cutters working at a Walmart supercenter in Jacksonville, Texas, made history by becoming the first group of Walmart employees in the U.S. to vote to unionize. 7 out of the 10 workers who voted in the election voted in favor of unionizing with the United Food and Commercial Workers Local 540. Doug Doherty, who was the president of the UFCW at the time, called it the vote heard round the world. Quote, "This victory could open the floodgates of pent-up worker frustration at the abusive treatment, low pay, and lousy benefits at Walmart," Doherty said after the election. Workers at the Jacksonville store and the labor movement in general had a lot to be excited about at this point. Walmart was the largest private employer in the country, and it still is. With 2.3 million employees worldwide and 1.3 million of those in the US, Walmart still beats out Amazon, which has 1.6 million employees worldwide and 1.1 million of them working in the US. And like Amazon, Walmart has been notoriously and virulently anti-union from the very beginning, doing everything in its power to dissuade or prevent workers from unionizing. Quote, "I have always believed strongly that we don't need unions at Walmart," Sam Walton, founder of the company, famously wrote in his autobiography. "Theoretically, I understand the argument that unions try to make, that the associates need someone to represent them, and so on. But historically, as unions have developed in this country, they have mostly just been divisive," end quote. Now, Walmart has been something like labor's white whale for many years. And, with the union victory in Jacksonville, it seemed like the labor movement was finally advancing. Meat cutters at other Walmart locations, including 2 in Texas and 1 in Florida, also petitioned the National Labor Relations Board to hold their own union elections. Then, later that same month, in a move that the company spokespeople claimed had absolutely nothing to do with the union election, Walmart suddenly announced it was shutting down its family butcher-style meat-cutting operations in 180 stores across 6 states and would be stocking its meat sections with case-ready beef and pork bought and prepackaged outside of the stores. Because the election occurred before Walmart's devastating announcement, the company was still bound by the National Labor Relations Act to bargain in good faith with the union. But, unsurprisingly, it refused to do so, claiming that the election hadn't been fair. The company continued to delay bargaining and challenge the results of the election until the new prepackaged meat system was fully implemented at the Jacksonville store on July 15th, 2000. As soon as that happened, in a calculated sleight of hand, Walmart changed its tune and claimed it did not have to bargain with the meat cutters because the changes within the store meant that a meat department bargaining unit was functionally obsolete. After years of legal back and forth, the meat cutters got some back pay and some small concessions from Walmart, but they never got their union. And Walmart, for its part, had succeeded in sending a clear message to its hundreds of thousands of workers about what could happen if they unionized in their stores. It also gave other businesses a very clear lesson on how they could undercut workers exercising their right to organize and how they could union bust by essentially jumping through the gaping loopholes in US labor law. That, as you no doubt have noticed, is a lesson that a lot of companies are putting into practice right now in their gross, greedy, shitty, and underhanded attempts to squash the burgeoning labor organizing movement in this country. As we've discussed previously here on Breaking Points, Starbucks is undoubtedly leading the way right now as the most blatant example of a company using extreme and almost certainly illegal tactics to delay, demoralize, and destroy the union wave surging in Starbucks stores throughout the country. Those tactics range from firing pro-union workers for bogus reasons, and they've done that a lot, to punitively understaffing and underscheduling workers at pro-union stores, refusing to recognize or bargain with the union, to going nuclear and outright closing unionized stores, which is illegal if it is done in retaliation for organizing activity. Now, I played a clip for y'all recently of my interview with Nadia Vitek from the College Avenue Starbucks in Ithaca, New York, which was closed in June after workers unionized. After that, Starbucks announced 16 more store closures, including other stores that had already unionized or that were starting to organize, like the Starbucks in Union Station here in DC, about 10 minutes from where I am currently sitting, which was just closed last week. But other companies are following suit, and that is a serious problem. In a recent panel interview for The Real News, I spoke with Beck, another worker organizer from the Ithaca Starbucks that was closed, and I also spoke with Gami Ray, a barista and worker organizer at Heine Brothers Coffee in Louisville, Kentucky, whose pro-union store was also abruptly and suspiciously closed. Listen to Gami describe that experience.
At Douglas Loop, the store that I worked at, it was the middle of the day. We had been the most vocal union store. We had been the first to sign our petition. We had our little union stickers up around the store, and I had a lot of support from the community. The community was coming in and being vocal about it. And then one day at 2 o'clock, as my shift is coming to its end, I see multiple people from headquarters who I had never seen step foot in our store, or who it was just not routine to be in our store, show up, and they asked me to start doing closing duties after I had just worked an open to 2. And as the next shift arrived, they pull us behind the counter, letting us know, well, before the next shift had arrived, they had asked us to help ask customers to leave because we were closing for the meeting. And so they came behind the counter after second shift had gotten there, and were very short with it. They said, after much consideration, we are closing the Douglas Loop store effective immediately. Make sure that you have all of your belongings, because you won't be able to come back and get anything else. Make sure to leave your key. Here is a packet with all the information about the 2 options you have, which are severance, leave the company and receive severance, or receive a stipend and stay with the company and transfer to one of the other 17 stores, which at the time we had no idea that we were going to have no choice, no deliberation on which store we were going to. I specifically was transferred to a store 16 minutes away from my house. Douglas Loop is a 15-minute walk. I don't have a car. And a lot of us lived really close to Douglas Loop, and we all got transferred, split up to different stores. But yeah, we were all just stunned.
If you're pissed now, I'm just giving you fair warning. You're gonna get more pissed by the end of this segment. We're gonna do a full segment on this topic at some point in the future, but I think it's important to note now that Starbucks and Heine Brothers Coffee are not the only union-busting companies that have traditionally marketed themselves as progressive. These companies have profited off their images as inclusive, caring, socially conscious businesses that employ LGBTQ workers, workers of color, and so on. But when those same workers choose to exercise their right to organize, these companies show how progressive they really are. In 2 episodes of my podcast, Working People, I spoke with former employees of the quote-unquote progressive vegan meat alternative company No Evil Foods about the company's union busting. In 2020, the company waged a relentless campaign to thwart workers' efforts to unionize with the UFCW, including holding mandatory captive audience meetings where workers were regularly bombarded and scared with misinformation about unions. Then, last June, After successfully busting up the union drive at their production plant in Asheville, North Carolina, the company's faux progressive founders suddenly announced that they were closing the plant. Operations were going to be moved to a co-manufacturing facility in Illinois, and workers who had sacrificed greatly during the pandemic for No Evil Foods were suddenly unemployed and received zero severance pay. And because they did not have a union, workers did not get to bargain over the conditions of that closure or the layoffs. A horrible and eerily similar situation is happening right now at another progressive vegetarian company, which is beloved by a loyal consumer base. Few frozen food brands are as well known in the United States as Amy's Kitchen, a privately owned, California-based company that makes organic, vegetarian meals that can be found in most frozen food aisles. But when workers at two Amy's production plants in California, in Santa Rosa and San Jose respectively, began to organize and to speak out about their brutal working conditions, the company's progressive veneer started to crack. In February of this year, for the Real News Network podcast, I spoke with Carmen Anguiano and Maricruz Mesa, two workers at the Santa Rosa plant. They described to me hellacious, breakneck work speeds to meet absurd production quotas of 25,000 plates of food in one 8-hour shift. They told me about working with torn tendons and chronic pain from repetitive motions and insufficient COVID safety measures. And when workers spoke up about these conditions, they faced hostile responses from management. At the Santa Rosa plant, workers like Carmen and Maricruz have been organizing with help from the Teamsters, whereas workers at the San Jose plant had been working to organize with support from the union Unite Here. But last month, the San Jose workers received the devastating news that Amy's was immediately closing the plant, with the company citing operational costs and supply chain disruptions to justify the closure and the loss of 331 jobs. On behalf of Breaking Points, I reached out to workers there and received this heartbreaking statement from Ruby Luna, a now former machine operator at the Amy's Kitchen plant in San Jose. Quote, "My coworkers and I are completely shocked at the closure. We were lied to until the last minute. An hour after we clocked in, we were told our jobs were gone. Amy's claims we are their family, but no one treats their families this way. We are asking the public to continue boycotting their products until they meet with our union to address our concerns and the devastating impact to our lives." Now, I could keep going, because this shit keeps happening. But let's look at just one more example of this despicable trend. On June 22nd of this year, workers at a Chipotle restaurant in Augusta, Maine, made history by becoming the first store in the US to file for a union election with the NLRB. Then, on Tuesday, July 19th, Chipotle announced that it would be permanently closing the Augusta location. As they always do, you may have noticed this trend, spokespeople for the company have denied that the closure is related to union organizing activity, saying that it was instead related to staffing challenges. But workers and their supporters say the drastic move is a clear act of retaliation and union busting 101. By closing the Augusta store, Jeffrey Neal Young, a lawyer representing the Chipotle workers, told the New York Times, quote, "It's signaling to Chipotle workers elsewhere who are involved in or contemplating nascent organizational drives that if you organize, you might be out of a job," end quote. Now, on Working People, I recently spoke to Brandy McNeese, a worker organizer at that Augusta Chipotle location and a founding member of Chipotle United. Brandy used to be a manager at Chipotle before taking an office job that she unfortunately lost during the COVID pandemic. After losing that job, she went back to work at Chipotle as a certified staff trainer. Listen to her describe the experience of walking back into a Chipotle after her time away.
So all of my efforts to improve the store overall with the appropriate training were unrealized um, because it was so understaffed. The other issue when I came back to the store, so I was gone, like I said, for 2 years. And when I came back in January, it was with the intent of helping the crew to get back to where they could be in terms of performance and food safety and staffing. But the first thing that I noticed when I walked back in was just the disrepair that the store had fallen into. It was not clean. Things were broken. Like the equipment was broken. We had a gas leak. We all worked through a gas leak for 2 weeks, being told that's not what it was until the grill caught fire one day.
Jeez.
And the stovetop the same way. They very much had to, well, they kept saying it's because we put it back together wrong, but there was 3 or 4 times that flames shot out of the stovetop too. In the very first part of when I was there, the grill and the stovetop and the rice cooker would intermittently fail. So at one point, we just removed all of the grill items and all of the stovetop items from our online ordering instead of just shutting it down. There were also times where I had to make online orders with ingredients or that called for ingredients that we didn't have because they didn't get them for us because nobody had been trained on how to make orders correctly. And so we were, in addition to struggling to keep up, we were taking the brunt of all of these failures, and we were asking for help, and just everything was falling on deaf ears.
Brandy and her fellow workers begged and begged Chipotle to send them the staff, resources, and training that they needed to keep their jobs and keep their store running at a safe, efficient, and healthy level. When those pleas went unanswered, instead of quitting one by one and leaving their friends to deal with the mess on their own, they took that brave, terrifying step to band together and to do something to improve their working conditions. And Chipotle's response was to close the store. I can only imagine the fear, anger, anxiety, and disappointment that Brandy and her coworkers must be experiencing throughout all of this. But I want you to listen to her talk about why they are still carrying on the fight.
Everybody has a voice. Every single one of us is one of us. And it's not going to change unless we can all say, we're done being treated like this. You know, everybody's like, oh, well, they'll close every Chipotle or they'll close every restaurant or every store. We have proven through the pandemic that that's not true. They won't close us down because everybody needs us. What, is everybody going to start cooking for themselves? Yeah, right. You know, they need us. They need service workers, but they should not be allowed to employ service workers and treat them so poorly while they're taking in profits hand over fist.
If you've been watching The Art of Class War from the beginning, then you know that this story hits nearly every single topic that we focused on from the beginning. Chronic understaffing, workers deciding to stay, fight, and improve their workplaces instead of leaving, engaging in protected, concerted activities like union organizing and walkouts over unsafe conditions, and what appears to be pretty obvious retaliation against workers for engaging in such activity. I want to end this segment by reminding all of us that we can and must do something about these store closures, these firings, and all of the rampant union busting that companies like Chipotle and Starbucks are engaging in broad daylight right now. Listen, I need you to get mad about this. Let these companies know what you think about them violating their employees' rights and tag them on social media. Don't let them sweep anything under the rug. Write letters to their head offices and their executives. Sign petitions like the one that Chipotle United is asking people to sign right now. Ask local and national media outlets to cover these stories more. Or, if you were so inclined, you could ask your political representatives why the vast majority of them haven't said jack shit about any of this. Most importantly, if you are unsure about what to do best to support workers, the answer is always listen to the workers themselves. You heard Ruby Luna call for customers to continue boycotting Amy's Kitchen in her statement. Calling for a boycott is a powerful weapon that workers have but need to use strategically when they think it will be most effective. So, we use it collectively when it's called for by the workers. But in the meantime, if you want to withdraw your business and let the company know why, that's your call. As always, the single best thing we can do right now for each other is show up, show solidarity, and stay committed to these struggles. As Howard Schultz and Starbucks escalate the war on their own workers, workers themselves are ramping up too, with strikes happening in Ithaca, Buffalo, Boston, Minneapolis, and beyond. Go to those picket lines. Show your support. Donate to strike funds and hardship funds for fired workers because they are in dire straits right now. And you have no idea how much it means to show that little bit of solidarity. Labor laws in the US are already so ridiculously stacked in favor of the bosses, but when workers still manage to play by the rules, stick together, and win fair and square, billionaire and millionaire executives flip over the chessboard, close stores, fire workers, and they find whatever BS excuse they need to deny that it's union busting. And they will rack up as many unfair labor practice charges as they need to until they bully, intimidate, and crush workers back into submission. That is what they are doing right now. That is what they hope will happen. But businesses don't exist without people, and people have rights. And if you want our business, you need to treat people with some goddamn respect. And we, as consumers, as taxpayers, as community members and fellow workers, are going to show these companies what happens when they don't. Thank you for watching this segment with Breaking Points, and be sure to subscribe to my news outlet, The Real News, with links in the show description. See you for the next edition of The Art of Class War. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other. Solidarity forever.